thank you for helping me to get through that. It was certainly unplanned on my part, but I've been so moved by what I've watched and seen, and just so grateful to be born again. Just so grateful. Today is part 5 in our series on encouraging words. I've called it Word Thinkers. I will not even talk about word thinkers until I get to the absolute end of this message. So you may be wondering, well, when's he going to talk about word thinkers? You know, it'll be the very last thing that I talk about. Have you ever had an ugly night with somebody, ugly day with somebody? I have, unfortunately, and I was thinking about why God wanted me to even share this with you, but I am. I probably shared parts of it with you at other times, but this was one ugly night that I remember when I look back on my personal life and all of the times that I said something that was nothing but pure discouragement to somebody else. I cringe. I just cringe thinking about, well, how ugly was that, you know? How demeaning was that to somebody? I so vividly remember, I still remember it like it was yesterday when I was still young in the Lord. I just gotten out of the seminary, and Brenda and I had moved back, and we had we lived in a little old trailer out on, a little single wide trailer at her mom's house, and started going to this church. I thought I was God's gift to the church. Unfortunately, that was a very strong miscalculation on my part. Trust me, I know that. I wasn't ready to lead anybody. And we were going to a church that was kind of a new start, and it was we had a really wonderful pastor. I look back on it and just realize how much I love him. But he did one thing. He just did one thing. Just one thing only, and it really upset me. It hurt me. It wasn't anything bad. It was just something I did not like, and so I went to him one night, and to make it worse, I took some other people with me. I took about 2 other people with me, just so that they would hear what I had to say. And I spoke my mind without thinking. How much have we talked about that, right? Just speaking your mind, just saying what you want to say without thinking through your words or anything. And I said some very negative things about this one decision that he had made that involved me. It involved me. It was something that he knew I wanted to do, but he chose not to let me do it. And I was hurt by it. I was just hurt, and I didn't know how to respond to it. It wasn't anything big. He was going to be out of town, and he asked somebody else in the church to speak rather than me. And I just got hurt by it for some reason. You know, I just felt like, hey man, I had this burn that I had to preach or teach or whatever it was. And so as I was talking to him, I criticized him, his teaching, and I told him that I was leaving the church after having been there for 3 years. I said, I'm leaving. I'm done. You know, I don't enjoy your teaching. It's too dry. Whatever it was, my words were very hurtful, and to this day, I still remember and regret how hurtful those words were to him. He just sat there. He was kind of stunned, I think, that I was even there. About a year later, me suffering from just sheer stupidity, we asked him and his wife to come over to our house. We were now living on South Boundary, and so they came over, and we fixed a nice meal for them, and we asked them to come over for supper. And during that time, I just sincerely and genuinely asked both this pastor and his wife to forgive me. It had been about a year, and I'm still broken about what I did. And in that conversation, he communicated that both he and his wife did, which I knew they would, but he also mentioned how what I did sort of devastated this young church, and it had taken them a long time to get over it. He said even after about a year, he wasn't sure that they wasn't sure that the church had gotten over it yet. Other people were hurt, and even to this day when I see him somewhere, I still hurt because of my ugly words and my thoughtless words and my unkind words and my toxic words and all of the things that we're talking about, my arrogant words, spoken to somebody that really, really loved me and cared for me. This was one of the worst moments in my Christian life. I've looked back, I thought about it this week, and I said, I think this one ugly night has been the worst. It was the worst moment in my Christian life. The worst. I never even, and after it was over, it was because of this one event that God disciplined me for 12 years. Do you know how long 12 years is? Do you know how long 12 years is? To be disciplined by God because of about 5 to 8 minutes of ugly words that you speak to somebody. I never even gave him a chance to respond. I just spoke my mind and left. And I'm still amazed that God even ever chose to use me again after that moment. I do. I am. Today, I just prostrate myself before the love of God that He even thought that I would be usable. And I still hurt. I hope you can feel the hurt because of what I said and how I said something to this very precious brother that loved me. He cared for me. He made a sacrifice for me that I seem to just completely ignore. And it's really difficult for me when I see him in public, which is not very often, and speak to him. We've sort of made our amends. We've gone our own way. I've sought forgiveness. He's provided it. But there's something still missing. There's something strategically missing in all of that. I don't think I will ever be restored. I know he forgave me and he moved on, but that does not remove the hurt and pain that still resides in my own heart for being so callous, and so insensitive to how my ugly words actually were at the time. I've never done that since. If you've been disciplined by God for 12 years, you would never do it again. I've never done it since, and I'm never going to do it again. Ever. As we begin this morning, I want to reiterate how powerful your words are. I mentioned last week that I'm not going to let us rest from that. How very powerful our words are, for either good or bad. The impact that they can make in a person's life. Obviously, wrong, negative words, ugly words can have a very strong negative impact on a person's life. We all have probably said ugly things to people and used toxic words. But I really don't want to stay there. And I asked the Lord this week, I said, Lord, I don't want to just always be talking about ugly words. I want to approach this entire series from the position that I personally do not want to be a negative person, and that you do not want to hurt people with your words. I don't want to hurt people with my words. I want to help them. I want to build them up. Doesn't matter where they are in their life. Doesn't matter what they're going through. It doesn't matter maybe what they've done to me. I just don't want to hurt people with my words. So that's the baseline that I want to work from as we continue to talk about encouragement. Here's what we know already about encouragement. Let me just remind you. Encouragement, godly encouragement, is positive. There are times when we have to say, things that are constructive. I don't want to call it criticism, but there's sometimes when it may appear that we have to be negative, but encouragement is positive. Encouragement builds people up. Encouragement is something that strengthens them, and I want to say this, is that encouragement never tears people down. It just never tears people down. It is looking for ways to build them up in their life. I don't want to ever be around somebody and them be worse off for having been around me because of what I said. I want to be strong in the Lord, strong in the power of His might. And I believe that everyone in one form of another, I don't know how to say all of this, they just need to be affirmed. People that you meet, people at work, family, relations that you have with people, they just need to be affirmed. It's not that everybody's going to receive your affirmation, but at least you and I can do the right thing, and we can let the love of God just sort of flow through us. I was thinking about the fact that so many people that I know, so many people all around the world are just hurting. They're struggling to know how to relate to people. They are struggling in their life and how to relate to their own family, how to manage all of the negative emotions that they may be struggling with. They're hurting. And on top of that, the world around us just seems to be coming apart at the seams. I mean, we have massive earthquakes. we have seemed like one hurricane and tornadoes, and after another, we have civil unrest, we have countries that are going through civil war, we have LGBTQ kind of issues to deal with. People are anxious about their children, and they're anxious about their family, and they're anxious about their finances, and they're anxious about life itself. And it's almost like people sense and sort of have this intuition that something is going to happen, but there's just nothing that they can do to stop it. And so they become anxious and afraid of just life itself. Just become anxious about life, about living in life, you know. People shooting kids out of college or in a grammar school and then shooting themselves, and you just don't even know if it's safe to send your kid to a public school, you know. I want you to listen. I want you to turn in your Bibles, if you would, to Proverbs chapter 12. Spend a little bit of time in Proverbs. Proverbs is so rich. I read it every day. Proverbs chapter 12 and verse 25. Talks about this kind of anxiety that people have. And I want you to see what Solomon said. He said in verse 25, he said, anxiety in the heart of man causes depression. It causes depression. But a good word. There's our word again, Chris. The word what? But a good word makes it glad. And we know that when people do become anxious, that they do become depressed, they become disillusioned, disappointed, discouraged, disheartened. And at that point in their life, the last thing that they need is for somebody to come to them with a discouraging word, to say something that is discouraging and insensitive to them. And that's where real encouragement takes place. This is when a good word, look at the verse there, a good word, a wholesome word, an encouraging word, a well-timed word, a beneficial word, an appropriate word, an excellent word can mean so much to someone. That's what encouragement is all about. It's finding the right way to say the right things to people at the right time that build them up and encourage them. It's not always the right moment. It's not always the right time. You don't want to do this when you're tired and angry or upset, but you want to have a good word. This is what encouragement does. Turn over to Proverbs chapter 15, verse 23. I think this verse reiterates the idea of saying the right thing at the right time in the right way when it says, a man has joy by the answer of his mouth, and the word spoken in due season. That literally means a word that's spoken at the right time. How good it is. How good it is when you find a way to say the right thing the right way at the right time. It's powerful. it's persuasive, it's effective. It carries with it great benefit and great blessing. And if I read this verse here, if you just look at it, it not only greatly benefits the person who is receiving the encouragement, it benefits the person who is actually giving the encouragement. Man has joy. Man has joy by the answer of his mouth. I found personally that when I try and offer encouragement to someone that my life is greatly blessed, I do find this joy. It's real. I find joy and worth and value in my life that I do not have when I am more disposed to just point out somebody's faults and shortcomings and tell them all the things that I found wrong with their life, like I did with this young pastor. This is his first church. It was a new start. It was a church plant. Go to Proverbs chapter 16, verse 24. I think we've read this already. But it says, pleasant words. Pleasant words are gracious words. They're words that are kind. They're words that are wise and sensitive. And it says here, they're like a honeycomb. They become sweet to somebody. You eat the honeycomb and it's sweet, and they become sweet to that person's life when they're struggling with various issues in their life. It could be any kind of issue. It could be health issues. It could be emotional issues, psychological issues, family issues, job-related issues. It could be anything that they find themselves struggling with in their life, and half the time they don't even know that they may be struggling with that. They don't know how to give definition to it. If I read this verse correctly, and you look at it, it says it's sweetness to the soul, but it's also health to the bones. If I read it correctly, encouraging words actually have a healthy benefit to the person that's receiving these words. I don't know exactly what that benefit is. I went back and did some more research this week to kind of see if I could determine maybe what that meant. And I read this past year when I was working on our series, Connecting My Mind with My Life. I had this wonderful book that I read. I don't think it was written by a Christian, but it was still a really great book. I enjoyed it. I've referred to it many times. It was called Words Can Change Your Brain. And I wanted to say that words can change your life. And good words and pleasant words help release people from all of the tension and the anxiety that tear them down. That just the fear with which they may be struggling, it releases them from, in a technical way, pleasant words and good words that are spoken to somebody actually release neurochemicals in their brain that spread into their every cell of their body that helps them to feel better. I want you to listen to 3 of the brain facts. I'm not doing a series on brain facts, but just 3 of them that I learned when reading this book. These are very important to me. They have a lot to do with encouragement and how you go about encouraging somebody, helping somebody with your words. And study after study, in a comparison of the number of positive thoughts versus the negative thoughts that you engage in with somebody when you're having a conversation with them, there's what is called the 3-to-1 ratio. The 3-to-1 ratio. After reading all the kind of information on that I thought, well, maybe it needed to be higher, like a 10-to-1 ratio, because I know how powerful just one inflammatory comment can be in somebody's life. But they labeled it the 3-to-1 ratio. Now I want you to remember something. I want you to write this down. I'll give you 3 words. I want you to write this down in your notes. Is that thoughts become words. Thoughts become words. What you're thinking, if you say something negative and ugly, it's because you're thinking negatively and ugly. But here's what the 3-to-1 ratio actually said. It said that if you express, I think that was a key word for me, if you express fewer, less than 3 encouraging and positive thoughts or behaviors. I thought the idea of behavior was kind of interesting, because it could be something like where you just cross your arms when somebody's speaking to you and you're just looking around and not listening. Sort of a negative behavior, or you're just tapping your toe and you just cannot get settled with what it is that is going on in this conversation. But if you express fewer than 3 encouraging and positive thoughts or behaviors for each negative thought that you have, that the interaction that you are having with that person is destined to failure. It's like you can say 2 nice things and 1 bad thing, and the conversation is not going to go anywhere. That's why I think 3 maybe is a little bit, because I think you could say 3 really good things to somebody and then say something really toxic to them, and you've lost everything that you were trying to do. I think what I'm trying to say is that you cannot be encouraging to somebody with negative words. Just can't happen. If you're negative, you just cannot encourage somebody with negative words. Negative words have the ability to completely annul and displace anything positive that you may be trying to say to somebody. It annuls it. It erases whatever it was that was good that you have just said. It just removes it. You know, you working really hard to say something positive, encouraging, but you let something toxic slip out, just kind of casually. It just happens, you know. You speak your mind, and everything that you're trying to do is lost. Just lost. The second thing that I learned was that the first words that you express in your communication to somebody sets the tone for everything else that's going to be said. You could say something to somebody, you could say, I think we need to have a talk. And I think the other person is thinking, no, we don't. No, we don't. So these first words that you express in a conversation, they set the tone for the entire conversation, and research has found that just one compliment, no telling what, 3 or 4 compliments, not flattery, just compliments, just real life communication with people. Just one compliment, what it does to the other person, it enhances their receptivity. And in the book that I was reading, it said their receptivity and their trust, which I thought was kind of an interesting word. Their trust in what you are going to communicate. It's like they see value in me. I think I can probably trust them. The third thing that I found, this is really, really practical things this morning practical instruction. They found that if you soften the tone of your voice and talk more slowly, if you just soften the tone of your voice, talk more slowly. This is really good advice. I'm telling you, this is really, really good advice. That it greatly impacts the hearer so that they will hear and respond in a more receptive way to what you're saying to them. The studies show that when you speak slower, that it actually deepens a person's respect for you. If somebody was saying something negative to you and they were just rolling it off and it was just coming out of their tongue and they couldn't stop and they were blasting you and they had one thing bad to say about you and another thing bad to say about you, you lose respect for them. And I think if you speak too fast, that they don't, and you're saying something good to them that they don't have the time to process it. Just don't have the time. There's just too many things. What did you just say? Point is that when you are encouraging someone, it makes all of the sense in the world that you speak to them warmly, that you speak to them with confidence, that you speak to them with empathy and compassion, and that you speak to them with hope. You build them up with words in the right way, and they will be much more inclined to both hear and receive what you're saying to them. However, the stronger your words, the more harsh that your words are, the more abrasive that your words are. I think one of the key words that I remember reading was that the more dominating that your words are in a conversation, it's like they just plug up the ears and the mind. The person that's listening to you, they're just not inclined to listen to you. I mean, why should they be? You should write this down, all right? Okay, write this down, and then I'll add a little bit to it. Just write down in your notes that inflammatory words are always harmful to any relationship. Doesn't matter what kind of relationship. If you have inflammatory words with your boss or with your marriage partner or with your children or whoever it may be, it's always detrimental to that relationship. Hurtful words, ugly words. I'm convinced, right or wrong, you can argue with me if you want to, that I'm convinced that enough of the wrong words can actually derail somebody's life. just derail their life. And especially in young children and teenage children who've not yet learned how to deal with the harshness of somebody's words. I've listened to people who have consistently yelled harshly or yelled and spoken harshly to their children or their marriage partner. They've cursed at them. I just cannot stand that. What the hell are you doing? It's like, it's just like, what does that do? And then we wonder why they have no respect for us. Trust me, as far as God is concerned, none of us want to become somebody that's constantly discouraging, using words that discourage other people. Because one day, I want you to turn, if you would, to Matthew chapter 12. Because it says that one day, Jesus is talking I'm going to give it to you. Just let everybody turn there. And it says in I want to begin in verse 35, but just so we get the background. It says, a good man out of the good treasure of his heart. We know that what's in the heart comes out of the mouth. The good heart brings forth good things, and an evil man out of the evil treasure, and I think you could add in there the evil treasure of his heart brings forth evil things, ugly things, harsh things. That's the background for what Jesus is saying, because he says, but. There's that famous word, that remarkable three-letter word, but I say to you that for every idle word men may speak, they will give account of it in the day of judgment. Every idle word, every careless word. I went out, I read this, and it's very frightening to me. Every idle word, every careless word. The New American Standard, the NIV, the ESV, the Holman Study Bible, the NRSV, and several others use the word careless word. The ISV translates it every thoughtless word. No thought. No thought. Just thoughtless. Just careless. I don't want people driving down the road being careless, right? Because of the damage that they can do, and they can kill somebody if they're just careless. But we do the same thing when we use careless words and thoughtless words. But you go back to Proverbs chapter 29. I apologize for just couldn't get it all together. Proverbs chapter 29 and verse 20 says, do you see a man hasty in his words? Do you see a man who just is quick to speak his mind? Maybe in our culture we would say to just say something too quickly. Just react. Notice what he says about this man that's hasty in his words. He says, there is more hope for a fool than for him. So if you're somebody that, for whatever reason, you're always inclined that you're going to defend it yourself all the time, you're just inclined to speak your mind, say what you want to say, to always be shutting people down. I know people like that. You got into if you get into a conversation with them and they think that you're wrong, they just shut you down somehow. They find a way to do that. I told you about the experience I had in Romania. It just broke my heart one day when I was talking to a young guy at the table at lunch, and he started talking about some area of theology that I just thought he was way off base, and I just shut him down. Remember me telling you that story? I had to go back, and I just wept and cried when we was at a pizza place, and I just can't eat. I couldn't eat. God wouldn't let me eat until I made it right. And the other minute, the table started weeping, and I had a man tell me, he said, Gary, he said, it was worth all of the money that I paid to come on this trip to see what transpired between you and this brother. And he asked him for forgiveness. Both of them were sitting at the table when we were eating lunch, when I just went on my little thought list, I'm going to shut you down. And they were there when that evening when we went out to eat and got a pizza. Speaking your mind, just shutting people down, just being abrasive and negative, then that's the way that you're inclined as far as God is concerned. Probably everyone else you know, there's more hope for a fool. I mean, read it there. There's more hope for a fool than for him. It's like God is saying, look at that man. Look at that stupid man. There's more. The fool is smarter. The fool, smarter and wiser than he is because he doesn't know how to control his tongue. Just says whatever he wants to say. We've already mentioned it, but what you want to do is to build your life and your words around always being an encouragement to people. Got to find a way just to somehow be an encouragement to them. Build them up. Reinforce for them what's good and what's godly for their life. They may not like what you have to say. They may not agree with you. They may want you to be quiet. But from your perspective, you're going to do the right thing. I want to talk to you for a minute. You may think I'm crazy. I want to talk to you about headbands. I read this really remarkable, I have this wonderful book. The book is called, I'll tell you what the name of the book is. It's in my bibliography. It's called Unleashing the Power of Encouragement. It's one of the books that I've read on encouragement. And I read this really neat example about how powerful words really are that I just felt compelled to share with you, even though the people, I mean, these were real people that were involved in this kind of, it was a workshop in this sort of experiment that was going on, being facilitated by somebody, how powerful words really were and are. Even though they weren't in a real life situation, everybody knew what was happening. And there were these various workshops that were being given to a group of students on leadership from various high schools. And so they brought, from 4 or 5 high schools in the area, they brought these kids that they felt like had good leadership qualities or something, and they brought them all together, and then they'd have 2 or 3 workshops going on at the same time. So in this one workshop, the facilitator asked for 6 volunteers, and then she sat them down in the middle of the room. Everybody else is kind of watching what's going on, and she sets them down in the middle of the room and she says, you 6 have been chosen to be the committee on the homecoming dance that's coming up in a month or something like that. You've been given the task of planning all of that. She didn't set any agenda. She just said, okay, you can get started. And so they just started talking about it, and when it was going to be and where it was going to be and all that kind of stuff, and how they wanted it, what they may want in it. And then after about 5 minutes of just watching and listening to what was said, she stopped them. And she asked each of them to wear a headband that had something written on it that the person didn't know. They put a headband on, and across the headband is something that's written, and everybody that's looking at them knows what the headband says. And they can see what the other headbands say, but they don't know what theirs says. And so they put this on, these 6 people. And the other 5 students knew what was on the headband of another person, but not the person wearing it. And then she told everyone, she said, you have to treat that person exactly like the headband says. No deviations. You cannot deviate from that. Everything that you say to them has to be based on that, what's written on their headband. And there could be no exceptions to it. And so these are the 6 things that were on these headbands. This is interesting. First one said, I'm a natural leader. Second one said, my ideas are always stupid. The third one says, ignore everything I say. The fourth one said, value all of my ideas. Number 5 said, laugh at my suggestions. Number 6 said, compliment me. So there were 3 that were very positive, and there were 3 that were very negative. And so what the facilitator did is that she matched up the headband to what she observed in that short 5-minute period of dialogue that these kids had had. For instance, one girl barely had anything to say. So she gave her the headband, the first one that says, I'm a natural leader. I mean, the girl, I don't know if the girl said anything or not. I'm a natural leader was on her headband. To a young boy who seemed to dominate the entire conversation, she gave him the headband that said, ignore everything I say. So she tried to match it up with,
She didn't do a very good job.
Yeah.
Pastors are in trouble.
Yeah. So every time that they had to make an important decision, everyone turned to the young girl whose headband said, I'm a natural leader, to get a decisive answer about what they were talking about. And she was taken back by everybody's confidence in her, but by the end of the exercise, which probably lasted about 20 minutes or so, she was just beaming with confidence because of how everybody was treating her. On the other hand, the young boy who everyone ignored, somebody would say, he would say something and everybody would just kind of look around and just say, well, go to somebody else. Well, what do you think? Everybody. He became so frustrated that he just took his seat and just backed it off from the table. That was his expression of, I don't like this, I'm frustrated with this. This is make-believe. Everybody in the room knows that this is make-believe, but by the midpoint of this exercise, he's already frustrated, 10 minutes into it, and doesn't want to say anything. So I asked myself, I said, what really happened in this meeting? What was it that really took place? Well, everybody knew that it was just an exercise, but even knowing that, it still impacted their demeanor. It impacted their attitude. To them, it was like it was real life. Listen very carefully. Didn't have anything to do with what was written on their headband. They knew that everybody was treating them by what was written on the headband. If they'd been smart, they probably could have figured out what was on their headband. But it didn't matter. That wasn't what dictated their attitude. It was how the other people in the group actually treated them. The young boy who had complimented me on his headband said that he had never, he said, I've received more compliments in the last 15 or 20 minutes than I have, I think, in my entire life. Every time the boy would say something, everybody would say, man, that's a really great idea. That's really good. Wow. Wish I'd have thought about that. The young girl who wore the "my ideas are always stupid" headband, she shared that after 2 or 3 of her suggestions that were completely ignored and dismissed, that she just gave up. She just said, I'm done. I'm not going to say anything else in any of this. She says that she did not appreciate being ignored and put down. She knows what's going on. She knows this is just make-believe, that there's nothing real. Nobody means anything. It's just role-playing, play-acting, and an exercise that's not real life. But it still affected and impacted everybody in either a very positive way or a negative way based on what somebody actually said to them and the words that they used in this workspace and in this role that they were playing. What actually happened is that 3 people, this is recorded, that 3 people walked away really encouraged, and 3 people walked away discouraged. Just really didn't think they could enjoy the rest of the workshops. And those emotional wounds were very visible to everybody. You would think that this was stupid because they knew what was happening. But the way people treated them deeply impacted their life, even if they knew that it was just make-believe. They still took it personally. The point is really very, very simple. Everybody needs positive affirmation and encouragement, no matter who they are, no matter what they're going through in their life. Just think for a moment of all the people that you know that for whatever reason you just don't like them that much, you don't have a lot of respect for them. Maybe they hurt you in the past, so you just decided that you were going to ignore them. And at that point, it did not matter what they said to you, even if it was good or right, or if it was an excellent suggestion. You just chose to ignore them. I think this happens in the workplace all the time. Just have somebody you don't get along really well, but they know more than you do, right? They know more than you do, but they don't, for whatever reason, they don't Maybe it had something happen and you just ignored them. You literally placed an ignore me headband on their head, and that was the way that you treated them. You weren't willing to place any value on what they were saying or what they may have been saying to you and to others, so you devalued them. I think this goes on all the time when we've chosen to devalue people. It's the word I want you to remember. Devalue people with our words and opinions, and just to devalue their life. Something negative has happened in our perception of them, so we simply ignore them. Maybe they said something negative or demeaning to us, sort of like I did to this young pastor. I was young and he was young. Maybe they said something negative or demeaning to us, so we shut them out of our world. I said, I'm not coming back to your church anymore. I don't like what you said to me. I don't like what you did to me. I'm going to put on your headband. I'm not listening to you. You don't have anything valuable to say to me. So we begin to treat them with disrespect, and we treat them with contempt. And that's exactly what I did. I treated a pastor of a church with disrespect and contempt. You know, I've had people that have come to this church over the years that treated me with disrespect and contempt. People that came here for years and years, and something may have happened and they didn't like a decision that I made. I know of one particular, I'm not going to go into the details of it, and they just did not like the decision that I made because it cost money. It was just, they were asking for money for something that when they passed away, rather than asking me, who had been their pastor for a long time, to do the funeral, they asked somebody else to do it. The family did. You can't treat people with contempt and disrespect. It simply is wrong. It has nothing to do with how God wants us to live. If I prostrate myself before the love of God, I realize that treating people that way is just bad Christianity. That's what I recognize. That's what I learned. That's what I know. I want you to turn to James chapter 2. I remember when I first got saved, but when I came back to Aiken, that I taught at a coffee house. The first book that I ever taught was the book of James. And I memorized the entire book. I couldn't tell you that now, but I memorized the whole thing because I had studied it for so long. And I'm reminded of what James chapter 2 says about how the poor were treated when they came to church versus how the rich were treated when they came to church. And you know the story here in verses, where does it start there? And starts at the beginning there with verse 2. Mr. Rich Man comes to the service and they ask him to sit down in the front at the seat. Then some poor person that doesn't have much money, they ask him to, somebody goes up to him and leads him to the back of the church, and they say, here, sir, you sit in the back. It's very comfortable back here. They have a new movie that's coming out tomorrow. I'm going to go see it. It's called The Jesus Revolution. It's about Chuck Smith and how the Jesus Revolution started out in Costa Mesa, California, years ago. Chuck Smith actually came to our home and ate with us, and we lived on South Boundary, and they had all these hippies that would come in. You'll see that in the movie if you go see it. It'd be worth seeing. And they came into the church, and they had on their shorts and no shoes, and they brought sand in with them, and they'd been down at the beach, surfing or something. And Chuck had started these Bible studies in his home, and then he was a contractor on the side, and full time, and then he was pastoring his church kind of bivocationally. And so the hippies started coming to his church, started coming to his house, started bringing people in the house that didn't have any place to go. And he said to them, "What are you doing?" And here's what James chapter 2, verse 5 through 6 says. He told them, he said, "Man, they're getting sand on our carpet." And he said, "I'll take care of that." And next week they came into church and the carpet was gone. I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but I'm not going to do that. So James chapter 2 says, verse 5, "Listen, my beloved brethren," just listen. Just listen. "Has God not chosen the poor of this world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom which he promised to those who love him?" Here's that word again, but. Oh, every time I see that word, I just stop. But you've dishonored, what's my word here? You've devalued the poor man. You've devalued the person that hurt you. You've dishonored them. "Do not the rich oppress you and drag you into the courts?" This happens all the time, and especially with people that may be more socially and economically disadvantaged than we are. The guy that's standing on the side of the road, the lady that's with her 2 kids standing on the side of the road with a sign. I think I told you this story, but I'm going to tell it to you again. I was going to Augusta to get my oil changed. And I get off of the Bobby Jones Freeway to go is it Bobby Jones Freeway? Yeah, to go to Bobby Jones Ford, change the oil and get my car serviced. And there's always somebody at the bottom of the hill that's got this sign. And I just kind of try not to look, they asking for money. They're coming up to the car and holding the sign there if you're stopped. And I'm praying, "Lord, would you please let the light be green?" And so I didn't. I just kind of ignored the guy. And then I go around the circle, and there's another guy that I see on the other entry. And he's got a sign. But it was cold that day. It was actually raining. And I thought to myself, these people ought to be inside somewhere, drizzling and stuff. And I ride by the guy, and I look at him, and he's missing both of his legs. He's got 2 prosthetic legs. He's in shorts. That's what caught my attention. The boy's in shorts out here in this 40-degree weather or something, Just somehow disadvantaged. And we look at those people and we see ourselves as better and them as less than better, and whether we do it consciously or whether we actually do it unconsciously, we very often just sort of treat them with a kind of subtle disrespect. I did. I'd be a liar if I told you that I didn't. It's like, I see this lady in Aiken all the time. She's got two of her little kids, and she's got the same son. She's walking around. She goes from one store to the other, and she's asking for money. You know, we don't have any money for me. I don't have any food. I got 3 kids or something. Do you remember what research taught us in our last series on connecting my mind with my life? I think you will when I tell you. Research has found that we have sized someone else up in 3 to 5 seconds after we have first met them. Within 3 to 5 seconds, we've already made a decision of what that person is like and how we are going to relate to them. 3 to 5 seconds. Let's see, do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've already made a decision. We look at them, we see how they're dressed, how they talk, what they're driving, where they live. And immediately we make a judgment as how we're going to relate to them. My wife and I were coming back. I guess we were coming back or going to Augusta. I forget which one it was. And we saw this guy. I just saw she was driving, and we saw this guy that was riding a bike. We were going down 421 through the valley. And they have some really rough-looking characters through there. And I remember what I said to my wife. We drive by. We're coming home. We were coming home. I remember where it was. We were coming home that afternoon because we had to go to Publix and get some medicine for her. And there was this guy that had a beard. He's scraggly looking. He was on a bike that looked like it was 8 years old, you know. Been out in the rust all day. Didn't have any place to live. He looked like I said, that guy looks like he's on drugs. And I ride right on past him. I've already made a judgment on that person. I have no idea what he's going through in his life. None. I wonder how the love of God can flow through me when I think like that. Rather than being somebody that just has mercy and just sees somebody differently, it's like, I've already made a judgment. I'm going to keep going. I mean, I wasn't going to stop him on his bicycle. I want you to look at Matthew chapter 7. Jesus is ending up the Sermon on the Mount. He's finally getting close to his conclusion, and he says in Matthew chapter 7, verse 12, sort of pinpoints the problem for us. He says, therefore, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them. How do you want people to treat you? How do you want people to relate to you? How do you want people to think about you? Well, whatever it is, whatever way you want them to do to you, you treat them the way that you want them to treat you. If you want respect, you show respect. If you want them to be kind to you, you be kind to them. If you want a friend, you be friendly to them. If you want them to love you, you love them. I think you have to ask yourself the question, you know, how do I want people to treat me? How do I want them to think about me? I want you to think of encouraging people. I think this is the right way to say it. I wrestled a little bit with how I'm going to say it, but I think you have to think about encouraging people as respecting people. wherever they find themselves in their life, you have to respect people, and because you're placing value in their life, on their life, if you respect them. Doesn't mean that you have to agree with them. It doesn't mean that they have to agree with you, but you still are going to just respect them. You've made up your mind that you're not going to say something ugly and abrasive and harsh and toxic to them. You want to say things that make them feel valuable to not only you but to themselves. I love the encounter. I want you to turn there in John chapter 8. I'll give you the verse in just a minute. Just turn to John chapter 8. I know some people argue whether or not this verse is even in the Bible, in the original manuscripts. I like it. I'm going to keep it in mind. I love the encounter that Jesus had with this woman that was taken in adultery. This story is so pregnant with love and mercy and kindness that it staggers me. Everyone that literally dragged this woman to this place, went into some house and dragged her out and brought her and threw her down, literally threw her down at the feet of Jesus and said, "What do you think about this woman?" They placed no value on her life. She was nothing. She was an outcast. She was a nobody as far as they were concerned, worthless. They couldn't see any value in her life. And in my mind, they weren't even willing to consider that she had any value. It wasn't even a possibility. But Jesus saw something in this woman that nobody else could see. He looked at her completely different. He saw somebody that was of great value, no matter what their past was like. They had great value, and it was his words that I believe that changed this woman's life forever. Whether this was or was not Mary Magdalene or whoever it was, has always been up for debate. It doesn't really matter. This woman's life was changed by the words that Jesus spoke to her. Notice what it says in verse 10 after he had spoken to all the Pharisees. When Jesus had raised himself, in verse 10, Jesus had raised himself up and saw no one but the woman. He said to her, "Woman," he said, "Ma'am, where are those accusers of yours? Has no one condemned you?" And she said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said to her, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." What Jesus was telling this woman is that she had great value. I don't condemn you. I don't condemn you. I'm not angry with you. I love you. I care about you. I will not mistreat you. I'm not going to treat you like they treated you. I care about your life. I'm going to say something valuable to you. And it changed this woman's life. That's what he was saying, and she knew what he was saying. Listen very carefully. When you encourage somebody, you're telling them that you value them, that they are more than important, than maybe even they think that they are, and that you want their life to flourish and for them to be successful in their life. That's exactly what you're saying, and that's what Jesus was saying to this woman. I cannot help but think about how often discouraging words are used in the home with children or with our marriage partners, and where we put them down or tell them how disappointed we are with them, and just how they will never make much of their life. In my mind, forgive me for my just utter bluntness about it, that's just garbage. It's just garbage. It's just garbage talk. It's completely unnecessary and unbiblical. If everyone that we meet is created in the image of God, and they are, then we should be very careful about how we talk to them. If God places great value on their life, and He does, then we should place great value on their life, no matter where they are at that moment in their life. Doesn't mean that we can change them. I'm convinced I can't change anybody. But that's why I should still never berate somebody, demean somebody, tear them down with words that are worthless. If you're just willing to take the time, maybe time is the key word in this, what I'm going to say here. If you would just take the time, think about what you're going to say to somebody, and then just find words that build them up rather than tear them down. There's no telling what will be the difference that one simple decision will make, both in their life and in your life as well. You're an encourager at that point. I think as Christians, it's our responsibility to know the impact that our words are going to have on people that we communicate with. I have to know that what I say and how I say it and when I say it and all of those kind of things, that I have a responsibility to know what the impact's going to be. Let me ask you a question. Let me say it this way. We've already seen multiple times in this study alone that life and death are in the power of the tongue. Life. Words are life-giving. Words are deadly. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. The power of the words that we choose to use with people. And so we have to embrace this reality. We must understand the impact of simple words that are spoken with discretion and well-timed. They're well-timed. It's a lot better to just think about what you're going to say and when you're going to say it and what the environment is in which you're going to say something. Just use discretion, be patient, versus the impact of harsh words that are spoken without discretion and with that are ill-timed. You have to make a choice as to what kind of words you're going to use when you're speaking to somebody. So let me ask a question. How often do you think that non-constructive criticism actually works? I did some research on this. I just wanted to just kind of see if I could go out and find out what negative criticism actually did and the impact that it makes in people's lives. I want you to give me a percentage of how often you think it really works. About 0. I could not find a percentage, but it was close to 0, whatever it was. The evidence is that it rarely, if ever, works. It rarely, if ever, works. In fact, research has validated that negative criticism is even more difficult to tolerate when it comes from those in our own family. I thought that was really, really interesting. It's more difficult to tolerate when it comes from within our family. If there's already marital discord in a family, for instance, unnecessary criticism only increases the unhappiness and the stress levels that those being criticized are facing. So let's just say that you notice that there is an unnecessary amount of criticism in a marriage. It's probably a sign that that relationship is really headed to a very difficult place. Just headed to a difficult place. You can choose to be negative if you want, but negative criticism is destructive criticism. I'm not saying that there's never a time for negative criticism. Sometimes it's well deserved. But for the most part, it does not have a lot of redemptive value to it. Here's what negative criticism is. So listen to my definition of negative criticism. Negative criticism is when you complain about something. It's when you complain about something and you say something. You say that somebody is wrong, but you never have anything to say that might be helpful to the person that you're criticizing. You just criticize them. You just say something negative. You don't find any words that build them up. You just criticize somebody. That's it. However, when you offer constructive criticism, which can actually be very encouraging to somebody, you do not complain or just disapprove when you are addressing something with them. Here's what you do. If you really want to be an encourager, I'm close to telling you what word thinkers are. Here's what you do if you really want to be an encourager. You offer a positive and alternative approach that allows both of you to be successful. If you just say, nope, I don't like that. Have you ever wanted to do something and you ask your partner, say, man, I would love to do this, and no, we're not going to do that. How discouraging that is just off the bat. Or you say something, nope, I disagree with that. Maybe say, never in a million years, not with me. Not going to happen. That can be really damaging and discouraging to somebody. What if you said something like, what if you changed and you said, I love your idea, but I'd like, if you don't mind, I'd like to just make a couple of simple suggestions to see maybe if it might make an improvement. Or give us a different perspective. When you speak like that, you're just showing respect for the person, even though you may not want to do anything that they want you to do, that you want to do. You're validating them and not tearing them down, even if their idea disagrees with yours. So encouragers are what I call word thinkers. Encouragers are what I call word thinkers. They're willing to take the time to think through what they're going to say, almost every word that they're going to use when speaking to somebody, and especially in a very stressful situation. Here's the last statement, because I want to be a word thinker. Here's what they do. I'm going to give you 4 things, just one sentence, but there's 4 things. They think before they speak. They do not use inappropriate and harsh words. They use gracious words. They speak slowly. And they speak in the right tone of voice. They think before they speak. They don't use toxic words. They speak slowly and they speak in the right tone of voice. This is what encouragers do. I don't know about you, but I want to be an encourager. I want to be somebody that encourages other people. They don't have to agree with me. I don't have to agree with them. I still want to do the right thing. See how God uses that. Anybody have any questions or any comments?